Okay, welcome back, guys, to another live stream. Of course, today is an emergency live stream because so many people wanted me to talk about the John Galliano news. Of course, all that I'm talking about today is, it's reported news, it's not confirmed. They did actually ask the Margiela team for a comment, and they gave kind of like a wishy-washy answer and saying that, John Galliano is feeling fine at Margiela and he's happy to be at Margiela and he has a really good relationship with Renzo. But it's rumored that John Galliano will be leaving Maison Margiela, and there are rumors of him possibly rejoining Dior. And there's also a smaller rumor that he could potentially be joining Fendi, which I think makes a lot less sense than Dior. Um, so yeah, really what we're talking about today is kind of how did we get here? Um, how what can we look forward to, and what do we think of him returning to Dior? If you guys have any thoughts about, John Galliano returning to Dior. So yeah, we can talk about that. Of course, he spent 10 years at Margiela. It's been a really long time. I think for most of it, he's been quite quiet in a way, which I find strange. Of course, the latest collection was, huge and it went viral online and on TikTok and on YouTube and whatever. But I've said this before, I'll say it again. There are so many John Galliano Margiela collections that I've thought have been amazing. And I still need to study his latest collection as, the couture collection as a case study as to what is it specifically about that collection that, pushed Galliano's name to the masses. I think that's very, very interesting. What I will say though is that there's been kind of this industry push for John Galliano to, do something big in fashion. I've talked about this article before, and I'll show you guys again, but this is an article via The Cut. And in this article, essentially, this was around the time of the Met Gala. This was written by Chantal Fernandez, who I used to work with at BOF, amazing writer. She recently just wrote a book on Victoria's Secret, so you guys can check that out if you want. But essentially, in this article, what they were talking about is the fact that the initial theme for the latest Met Gala would have actually been John Galliano, but it was almost blocked because, people didn't think it was the right time. They didn't think it was, based on the political and social climate that we're in right now, that it would be a good move to have a John Galliano themed exhibition. But Anna Wintour was pushing for it. And this is not the first time we see Anna Wintour, in John Galliano's corner. We've seen him, when he left Dior. It was Anna Wintour that put in a good nose for him, put in a good word for John Galliano for him to even be at Margiela and, for him to have a second chance in fashion. So I think Anna Wintour has definitely been in his corner, pulling a lot of strings. We've definitely seen that happen. We've also seen the timing of a lot of different things happening, right? Very recently, he had this interview on System Magazine on their YouTube. And there was also a separate video where he was sort of mentoring master's design students, which was really cool to see. But the timing of it is very interesting because if you think of System Magazine, they have, ties with LVMH. During the pandemic, it was why there was heavy coverage on designers that were at LVMH brands. We saw, different cover stars like Virgil Abloh and Kim Jones and JW Anderson and stuff like that. So when you think of the timing of that System Magazine interview, it's very interesting. And then also recently, we've also seen, someone is saying the video was good. It was very good. John Galliano was, for guys that haven't seen it, just, type System Magazine, John Galliano in YouTube. You'll see the interview. But it was a really good interview because he was talking about everything from why he agreed to do the documentary to, kind of the story around Zendaya, him dressing Zendaya, his viral runaway show and kind of why he thought it went viral. It was really, really interesting just to hear John Galliano talk about those things. I found it very interesting when he was talking about the documentary Something that he really, focused on saying was that a big reason why he agreed to doing the documentary is because he wanted the kids, as he puts it, like the young people in fashion, to really get familiar with his work. And I thought it was very interesting that he specifically said, he wants the kids to know about his work. It's like almost like he's trying to, not necessarily deliberately, but it's almost like an attempt to kind of take a hold of your narrative or the narrative around you, or to kind of get ahead of the narrative in a way, or sort of change the narrative in a sense, which I found very interesting because he was saying, yes, I want the young kids to watch the documentary. I did this for the young kids. That's something that he said that I thought was very interesting, that he focused on that. So yeah, that was really interesting. Luke says he's prepping for the role. Um, but yeah, I also think that when it comes to Dior, it's kind of a bad look that, all the years ago, for the anti-Semitic comments that John Galliano made, that he was dismissed from Dior only for them to hire him at the same brand, which is why, in a way, in a sense, I kind of understand the rumor about him going to Fendi, because I think him specifically going to Dior is a bit of a strange look. However, it makes more sense in terms of, his aesthetic. Where would his aesthetic work the most? I think it would work the most at Dior. But the Fendi rumor to me makes a bit more sense, because it's like, how are you going to dismiss someone only to hire them back? It's just not a good look. It's not a great look. It's not a great look. Micah says it's almost my bedtime. Pull up some of his older shows to give people a reminder. Before we do that, actually, I just want to pull up some of his shows at Margiela that I really liked. Like his co-ed collection in 2023, I liked. And then we can go and look at some of his collections at Dior, loads of which are extremely legendary, so legendary. And I think kind of like this redemption arc of John Galliano is very interesting as a case study. I will say though that John Galliano definitely seems like he's a changed person. He doesn't seem like, the same person that you would hear so many stories about in fashion, where John Galliano has just verbally abused this person, or John Galliano was drunk and he did this and did that. Because I think a lot of people, and I've kind of had this happen when I talk about John Galliano, a lot of people think that the reason why John Galliano was dismissed from Dior was because of, the anti-Semitic comments, which yes, it was. But John Galliano was known to be a very problematic person when he was at Dior. Of course, he had issues with alcohol abuse, and it would show itself in many different ways. But there are so many stories about things that John Galliano did around that time. It's not just the comments he made, it was kind of an accumulation of bad things that he did over and over and over again. And that was kind of just, the last straw. So yeah, I don't think that, people act like, oh, it was just one comment, it was just one thing. No, it wasn't. It was a a bunch of loads of things, actually. And if you talk to anyone that works in the industry, anyone that worked for Dior around that time, they will tell you themselves. Galliano at Dior today equals made in China, whatever. I think that if Galliano, goes back to Dior, I don't think he would settle for kind of the cheaply, produced, cheaply constructed stuff. I just don't think that's in his nature. I think he would actually try to, revamp the whole thing. And I think because the customers that love Galliano, they would also expect that from him anyway. So I don't even think Galliano would let them bastardize his legacy by, making these horribly crafted and constructed garments under his name. I just can't see a world in which John Galliano allows that to happen. Um, Pilar says he won't beat the bosses. But then, kind of, if you're hiring John Galliano, you should kind of understand that John Galliano is a bit of a control freak in the sense that he likes to have his hands in every facet of, the clothing. So if you're hiring him, it's kind of funny now that, LVMH hired Eddie Slimon and now they're complaining that he has his hands in everything when everyone knows that he's always been like that. The reason why Dior even started their Privé line is because Eddie Slimon started it there. So for him to go to Celine and then they're like, oh my God, he's like, asking for royalties and stuff, as if that wasn't the contract that he demanded when he got hired. I don't know. It's just strange. So, if you're hiring John Galliano, I think you just have to understand that that's kind of what comes with hiring him. Maya says, love his work, but as a Jewish person, it's definitely interesting how many people my age know his work, but only recently found out about the anti-Semitism after 24. Truly a testament to good marketing. That's crazy, actually, that a lot of people didn't really know about it. That's crazy. Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that people weren't aware of it, to be honest. I thought it was like really, really, really common knowledge. Pilar says, we're just in a different time in fashion. Just please think about Phoebe's return. And I guess this is kind of like the big issue with it's the issue with the times that we're in, I guess, which is why I was posing the question, like, would John Galliano at Dior work now, though? Would it work now? Someone was asking, was it commercially successful? Pablo? Yes, it was. Some of the most famous Dior stuff actually came at John Galliano's Dior period. Even stuff that they're still using now, like John Galliano, for example, famously designed the Dior saddlebags. And Maria Grazia Chiuri is making a killing re-releasing all of John Galliano's old work. um, yeah, so many collections. Everyone talks about, very specific collections that John Galliano did at Dior, where they're like, oh my God, like he needs to do that at Margiela just so I can buy that again. So no, it was heavily commercially successful. Orobot says, yeah, the anti-Semitism is so unfortunate. I thought it was common knowledge as well. Also, Orobot, thank you for the donation, by the way. I got a notification. I really appreciate it. And happy birthday in 29 minutes. People saying they want to see Craig Green at Dior. That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. Micah says I have hard-hitting questions, but I don't think society is ready for them. Hop in the stream, Micah. I'll drop the link in the chat if you want to join. I'm very curious to know what are these hard-hitting questions that you claim. But yeah, I think it's interesting, kind of like this marketing of John Galliano, kind of like his resurgence. You have a viral runway show, you have a documentary that comes out, you have interviews with Sister Magazine, you have Anna Wintour pushing for a John Galliano themed Met Gala. I think when you package all of it and the timing of it, it just feels so calculated that he was always going to, leave Margiela and then go to one of the big luxury brands again, and it would be like the redemption arc of John Galliano. I even think to some extent that, Kingdom of Dreams, if for those of you that have watched it, I think also that documentary series kind of helps his image because they portray in that series, they kind of portray not Galliano, Bernard Arnault as the big bad wolf that kind of overworked these designers that caused them to self-destruct. When you're talking about the likes of Alexander McQueen, John Galliano, Marc Jacobs, and I guess it kind of helps with the marketing of Galliano because it can make you more empathetic to the position that Galliano was in, kind of being overworked and resorting to, abusing alcohol and stuff. In the case of McQueen, it was drugs. The same with Marc Jacobs. And then it kind of allows you to, put the blame on Bernard Arnault rather than, anyone else. So I thought that was also kind of like a good thing in terms of like PR, John Galliano PR, or like a PR push for John Galliano's resurgence. Elle says the ultimate redemption would be being accepted as creative director for Chanel. I just don't think John Galliano's aesthetic works at Chanel personally. I just don't see the connection there. Like, I don't see it. Micah, you came in and then you disappeared. Galliano needs a house where the pomp and drama make sense. Margiela never really seemed like the best fit for him, even if I liked it. If I liked a lot of it, but I'd love to see someone fresh at Margiela. This is also another conversation people are having, sorry, because it's like, if Galliano is leaving, who is taking over at Margiela? And some people have made the argument I've seen online for the fact that, you know, Margiela has always had a team vibe to it. Even when Martin was there, it was very much a we. Even the way he would talk about the brand was in terms of we, not in terms of me. Everyone would wear those white lab coats. And, you know, it was all about a team effort. And even when he left, it was very much the team, you know, designing things for a while. So I think, if more so than at any other brand, I think Margiela is a brand where, just if you look at the history, you look at the philosophy of the brand, it makes the most sense to just have, you know, a team of designers in lab coats design the collections. But I guess in the fashion climate we're in now, that doesn't work commercially. It just doesn't. You just need a figurehead. I think because fashion is so commercial, you just need that one person that can be marketed. And if you have a team, there's not that one name that you can slap in articles and interview and do all those things. That other video you did a couple years ago on Galliano talking about the puff pieces that were made to uplift him, again years later, is what got me into watching and reading your work actually. Oh wow, I remember that video. That was the YouTube video I made years ago. I think it was titled something like "Why John Galliano Isn't as Respected as He Should Be," and I was talking about like all the stuff that Galliano has done that has kind of taken the focus away from his clothing. Because if we're talking about Galliano as a designer and just a designer, I think he's one of the best designers of all time. Definitely one of the best designers alive right now. Like top 5 easily. But you can't some people say separate, you know, the artist from the personal life, but I find it hard to do that because I think they're all intertwined. I think partially the reason why some artists are so good is because their lives are so troubled, and kind of the trauma of that comes through in their work. You could say the same thing about Alexander McQueen when he's, you know, referencing wars and his childhood and stuff. It would make for really good fashion, but it's coming from a place of trauma. I don't understand how in every documentary is showing how working at LVMH almost destroyed his life, but now working there again is considered a triumph. That is actually a really good point, Vic. That is such a good point. I'm not even going to lie. That's a very good point. Demna is taking over Margiela, apparently. Nah, no way. Demna's at Balenciaga, which is a way bigger brand, probably would make more money working at Balenciaga. So I can't see a world in which he would go to Margiela unless it's more of like a passion thing. And but if it's about money, salaries, stuff like that, I just don't see, you know, a world where Demna leaves Balenciaga, which is heavily successful, financially, right? Even down to like critically, it's critically acclaimed, not by me, but I think generally it is. A part of him being a creative genius, he is a cash cow for conglomerate, so those brands will do anything to cover all bad traces of anybody who is bringing money. He still has something to be extracted. That's a really good point in terms of, you know, Galliano is a designer that a lot of massive companies can make a lot of money from. So it's in their best interest to kind of control his image and to kind of make sure that his image is still intact. Micah, if you're still joining, I'll drop the link in the chat once again, by the way. Cobb says he laid low for a decade. Margiela was perfect because of the anonymity of the brand. Then after everyone moves on and the youngers have forgotten the scandal as discussed, he returns from exile. That sounds like an episode of Game of Thrones, returns from exile. Yeah, and I guess that's why, going back to his interview with Sister Magazine that came out not too long ago, where he was talking about the reason why he accepted to do the documentary in the first place was because he wanted, the young kids getting into fashion to learn about fashion and to learn about his story. Something he also mentioned in that interview is so that he doesn't have to talk about his story again also. So that those two things were very interesting, because the focus on, him saying I wanted the younger kids to see this seems like it's like return to, I want to return to taking control of my image type of thing. Galliano at Balenciaga would be interesting. Demon and him should swap. I would actually like to see Galliano at Balenciaga. I think his aesthetic would lend well to Balenciaga. He would make it very theatrical, and Cristobal wasn't really theatrical like that, but the garment construction would be there. The clothing, the design would be there. Although there would be some theatre that isn't really, yeah, there's not really, like Cristobal Balenciaga wasn't like that. So many interesting designers are out there. Let's not keep appointing the same five. I guess that's kind of what happens in these fashion musical chairs. I mean, another conversation that people are happening is that Sarah Burton, it was reported that Sarah Burton is, in contractual agreement with Givenchy, and obviously Givenchy have been looking for, well, supposedly looking for a designer for a while since Matthew Williams left. After the Claire White Keller period. So it would be really interesting to see if that gets finalized and if Sarah Burton works as Givenchy. I think it's a very good look. I also find it a strange coincidence that Lee McQueen himself started his eponymous label, then he went to Givenchy, and obviously he was doing both of the brands simultaneously. In the case of Sarah Burton, it would be designing at McQueen and then going to Givenchy after. It's kind of like she's following in Lee's footsteps in a way. It's kind of cool, in a sense. So I see the connection there, and I think her aesthetic lends well to kind of like the whole classic tailoring at Givenchy. So it works. It makes sense. Son of a Gun, I agree. I love that Galliano always gives a history lesson in his work. It's kind of like in the last, something I saw on TikTok, right, is from Galliano's last Margiela collection, I saw a lot of kids on TikTok like analyzing Brassai's photography, which I thought was really cool. It's kind of like Galliano has kind of gotten a new generation of kids into like certain artists or certain photographers and certain aspects of art history and stuff. So that's really cool that he has the impact to do that. I do think that JW Anderson also does that with some of his references too. So it's cool to see that. Micah said, I've realized people don't actually know what Balenciaga looks like. They just know Demna Balenci. I guess so. I guess so. But I think it's kind of hard to because fashion is so different to when I got into fashion. Like fashion is so mainstream, it's insane. Like when I was younger, when I first got into fashion, knowing about designers like Yoji and learning about fashion history made you a weirdo. Like people were just like I remember people I was around were just like, you're so obsessed with fashion, aren't you? But like it wasn't in, they didn't mean it in a good way. They're kind of like, why do you care so much about clothes? um Whereas now, I think it's so mainstream. Everyone talks about fashion. Everyone kind of looks at runway shows. That's why runway shows are way more viral now than they ever were. More people than ever talking about fashion. So I think that because of that, and because of how fast-paced fashion is in this TikTok era, I think no one actually has time to just sit back, read books, take in things. It's not like when I got into fashion, there was like no content really online about like fashion history, especially not on like YouTube. TikTok didn't exist. You'd have to read books and go into forums like Styles Zeitgeist and do all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of just a different climate. And I think it lends or it leans people to not doing enough research because, like I said, if you're getting into fashion now where we're in a TikTok age and you're just watching 60-second videos, how much can you really gain from watching 60 seconds of fashion on TikTok? So I think that's why you end up with a lot of people only being familiar with like Demna's Balenciaga, not really looking into um the history of the brand, or everything that Cristobal Balenciaga actually did, what he's famous for, the silhouettes that he made, the cocoon shapes, all those kind of things, the fact that his design lent to a garment actually sculpting the shape of a woman, not the woman sculpting the shape of the garment, all those sort of things. So yeah. Micah says he'll be a chat urban today. Serving the spicy whites. Did someone say my microphone audio is distorting? Is it still distorting? Let me know. Hopefully it's not still, distorting. I'll wait for you guys to say how the audio is. Okay, Leo says not for me. I mean, it is live, unfortunately. So sometimes if, connectivity gets a bit dodgy, then sometimes the audio can just be a bit dicey. But it shouldn't be for like prolonged periods of time. It should just be in like pockets. So hopefully it's all good. I've been editing all day, didn't even realize you went live. Yeah, I mean, it was an emergency stream. It came out of nowhere because I just wanted to, touch on John Galliano potentially going back to Dior very quickly, because I think it's very interesting news, and also just in general, a lot of people ask me to cover it. Micah, you need to jump into this live stream and ask your crazy questions that you wanted to ask. Because Micah said he doesn't think people are ready for the questions. I like the Margiela labeling with the blank tag and the numbered tag. I have thoughts on that, which I won't talk about today. Luke just wants me to put John Galliano Dior shows. We've already done that in a previous stream, Luke, though, where we looked at old John Galliano shows at Dior. We looked at quite a few, actually. The clip. This is from John Galliano's last couture collection. It's the famous one, the most famous collection he's actually had in an extremely long time. Luke said the kids need a refresher. But yeah, this is quite literally his most famous show in like the past 10 years, easily. Controversially, I prefer his ready to wear at Margiela than his ready to wear at Dior. Interesting. Josh is asking, do we know if Galliano Margiela sells well? Yes, it does sell very well, actually. Let me see if I can get some stats up. But the last time I checked, the sales were up by quite a bit, actually. Let me just get the figures up. But he definitely does. Okay, so it says in its latest fiscal year report, OTB said Margiela's turnover for the year to December 31st, 2024 rose by 23%, driven by Chinese and Korean markets, where sales were up by 72.4% against 2022. So there's been a lot of growth that he's seen since he's been at Margiela. So yes, it does do well commercially. His Margiela does very well commercially. I think also, and this goes back to me saying that fashion is so mainstream these days. I feel like when I first got into fashion, Margiela tabbies were kind of like a lot of people had tabbies, but it was more like a very, it was almost considered avant-garde to wear tabbies at the time. Whereas I feel like now tabbies are what fashion girlies wear as part of, like, if you think of the fashion girly, I'm getting into fashion starter pack, you buy tabbies. So I think it's, if you think of just commercially how many people wear tabbies now, it makes sense why they're having, revenue growth at Margiela. So many people wear that stuff. So many people have the Margiela pillow bag. I see a lot of people wearing those, especially in London. Tabbies were highbrow pre 2019, exactly. And does he have a hand in the beauty side? I know the fragrance is so huge and mainstream. I don't really know. I think he does have a hand in the beauty because Mutiny, Margiela Mutiny, that fragrance I think was a John Galliano fragrance. Let me just cross check that. I don't want to spread misinformation. But I think it was though. Let me just cross check that. Okay, yeah. So Mutiny, it says it on their website. Mutiny is the fragrance created by Maison Margiela under the creative direction of John Galliano. So yeah, he does have a hand in the newer stuff, but obviously the line that does sell for Margiela, the like Under the Lemon Trees, By the Fireplace, Jazz Club, all those fragrances do really well for Margiela. And he's not really involved in that side of stuff, but the new stuff, yes. Someone say the Branda hashtag effect for the tabbies. This is also true. Gats are having a moment because obviously it's very trendy to wear Adidas Sambas, and so the high fashion, I guess, version of the elitist version of Adidas Sambas are now Gats. That's kind of how people are seeing Gats. Even when I wear my Gats, people ask me if they're Adidas Sambas. So that's definitely like the fashion climate we're in. So Gats are definitely in right now for sure. For sure, for sure. People are saying they didn't really like Mutiny. Interesting. I liked it. I liked it. I liked it. I liked it. The replica fragrances, I'm not sure they're low key. On fragrance side of YouTube, so many people talk about the replica fragrances, and not just the fragrances. People talk about the diffusers, people talk about the candles. The special edition candles came out recently and they sold out. So I think people like the beauty side of Margiela is very, very big. I think a lot of people talk about it and a lot of people love it too. Gats our fashion motherfucker starter pack. I wear the fuck out of By the Fireplace in 2017. Or I wore the fuck out of By the Fireplace in 2017. Gorgeous scent. Yeah, kind of what Finn is saying. I think the replica fragrances are huge. Actually, I think they're massive. I'd love to know the figures on the replica fragrances, like how much money in revenue they make from just the fragrances every year. No, Gats and Sambas are definitely in the same talking points. They 100% are right now. Definitely. Luke is saying, so now rumors are saying he's getting his label back and launching John Galliano Haute Couture. That would also, I think that would make way more sense than going to Dior just because optics. And also, I don't know who owns the rights to his eponymous label, so many people bought it and sold it when it wasn't doing. Because the thing about his eponymous label, apart because at his time at Dior, he did well commercially. His namesake label didn't do well commercially at all, which is why the owners were playing hot potato with the brand. They would always sell it. Like, this person will buy it, then they'll sell it to this person. But if LVMH owns it, it makes sense for, rather than it being a dormant thing, to just give him back his house. Not give him back like to own, but like give him the reins to his house so he can, do things under his own name. That would make the most sense to me, to be fair. Okay, so people are saying that LVMH still owns it. So there we go. I think that would make more sense. That would make a lot more sense. And all the points for Dior are still relevant with his eponymous label if LVMH still owns it, because kind of this LVMH push um to clean up Galliano's image prior to him going back to having his resurgence in fashion. Arnold was paying for the marketing. Luke says, I'd still rather see him at Dior personally. I guess because obviously Dior is a bigger stage, the money, the budget is just bigger. If he goes to his eponymous label, not that many people will care outside of, fat people that are really into fashion with a capital F. But if he's at Dior, he's going to touch all the four corners of the internet. His own brand was not viable because he kept making unwearable clothing that couldn't be commercially successful. Galliano jeans did well, Galliano girl not so much. Yeah, exactly why, like I said earlier, it just didn't do well commercially, like at all. On Galliano, the brand was supported by the licensing deals. Once they all stopped, they shut the brand. I mean, it, if you just read like the financial reports at the time, when John Galliano's brand was still around, they made it seem like Galliano was just burning holes in investors' pockets. Like, it almost seemed like it was like an art project for him to just get ideas out there with absolutely zero consideration as to any merchandising or what would sell. And like almost everyone lost money investing in his brand. As I remember, his namesake brand was more so a way for him to have fun and get his creative intentions out for real, for real. Yep, that's definitely what it was. Brandon, yes, he did get fired from Dior. We talked about that earlier, but yes, he did. Are you saving Sarah Burton's Givenchy for another stream? I mean, I could talk about it. I touched on it very briefly. I could talk about it again if people want me to talk about it in another stream. But yeah. Maybe his time at Margiela has taught him commerciality. That's a good point, actually. So he's now in good stead. But then it depends. It depends on where he goes. If he goes to Dior, he was already good commercially at Dior anyway. So I think maybe if at a big brand like Dior or even Margiela under OTB, why it makes sense, under those big conglomerates is because his ideas have to be filtered through such a massive commercial um corporation that there are checks and balances with those kind of companies to make sure that his ideas aren't too crazy and his ideas can still be commercialized effectively. So that's why it works at, an LVMH brand like Dior, it works at an OT brand like Margiela, but at his eponymous label where there are probably less checks and balances because there wasn't as much investment into, his eponymous label. The teams are smaller, all those kind of things. So I think what he needs is a bigger team, people who can, filter through his ideas into something more commercial and those kind of things. Otherwise, he's just going to make something that's a bit too um, theatrical and not wearable, which doesn't do well commercially. Bob Roberts says we need younger and newer faces in fashion. I totally agree. That being said, unfortunately, A lot of designers just aren't really that good though. Like, without trying to be too negative about, the current state of fashion, I think that I don't want to mention any names today, but there are designers right now at big brands who I just think don't really have much, if anything, to say. And there's multiple of them. And these are like newer, younger designers. So I just think, even if we've tried to give some of these younger and newer faces in fashion, a chance, and it just seems like none of them have anything to say. I don't know why though. I don't understand why. Especially because some of them have barely even designed many collections um at these big houses. So they don't really have any excuse of like, oh, they're burnt out because they've been designing collections for 10 years, like a Dries Van Noten or whatever. They don't even have that excuse. So I just think that, unfortunately, where fashion is right now, there's young talent that I would want to see at big houses, but designers right now, like some of the designers at these houses that are younger, are not great. They're not fantastic. They just don't have anything to say. I'm not even going to be without mentioning names. Galliano would also be amazing at Westwood. He copied so much. I can definitely see Galliano's aesthetic working at Westwood, and yes, he did lift. I'm going to use the word lift a lot of inspiration from Vivienne Westwood. Maya says, I think Robert Woon would do really interesting things at Dior. I What I find really interesting is, like, because I don't really know if Robert Woon could do like a really commercial brand, because I don't really know how commercial Robert Woon stuff is. Because when I think of Robert Woon, I just think of, the red carpet. I think of couture collections, but could Robert Woon filter those ideas into ready to wear and, make clothing that sells? I don't know. This is also true. Zero ENG. That's a very interesting name. Um, the industry is a little too based on revolving doors and Croynism. The incubator system isn't working either. That's what's his name? At Tom Ford. It was reported that he just left, right? Peter Hawkins, there we go. Peter Hawkins just left Tom Ford after barely being there for that long. Um It's crazy. It's crazy. Luigi at Bali barely lasted many seasons. We saw Ludovic de Saint-Saëns last one season at Under Millimista. I just don't know why there's just designers going to brands for like 1 or 2 seasons and then leaving. There's this like lack of patience at brands. And it's once again, this is why I'm a big fan of the whole fashion system just collapsing on itself, because I don't like this perspective on fashion by these massive companies that brands have to grow every second, every day, and just have year on year growth and um um just always progress financially without ever just like keeping your aesthetic and just seeing where things go. They're just never content. I think these luxury brands genuinely think they're just going to continue growing until like they're worth trillions and then thousands of trillions and just keep going. They genuinely think that, which is hilarious because there's only so many people on this planet. And so and they're cutting all the corners, whether it's taking away lining in clothing because that saves money, finishing things badly, outsourcing to factories with awful working conditions and workers that aren't really that skilled. So I just want the whole luxury system to self-destruct. And I think part of the reason why there's this revolving door perspective on creative directors is because of this over commercial industry that we have right now, especially in luxury fashion. I absolutely hate. I cannot stand it. And that's why they're just like, oh, we didn't grow by 50% this season. Let's find another designer, which I find hilarious because no designer is going to give you that kind of growth when your brand is already worth 20 billion euros, 10 billion euros in revenue per year. It's just insanity. So unfortunately, that's one of the reasons why we have this, like, revolving door thing going on in fashion. And it's very different to when the likes of Marc Jacobs and McQueen and Galliano were all at these brands, because there was definitely more leeway and patience for these brands, because it was kind of like uncharted territory. It's kind of like Tom Ford at Gucci. It's uncharted territory doing the runway ready-to-wear shows and stuff like that. Or, Marc Jacobs starting ready-to-wear at Louis Vuitton. It's uncharted territory. So it was okay for them to kind of have patience and not expect, them to make loads of money absolutely immediately, because they weren't worth as much back then. They weren't worth as much back then. So yeah, there wasn't as much pressure working at those brands that I think there is right now. I think now there's just way too much pressure. Cobb says, because fashion is more business than art now. Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, once the conglomerates got involved, that was the end of it. I wonder how many students are swerving fashion because it is more of a business and moving towards art or textiles. I can imagine quite a few, actually. I can imagine quite a few. Chev says, I'm just over this lack of depth in fashion. Bring me some Boris Craig, Rick Glenn like designers. Yeah, and I also think that and I just I don't know why, but like I just think fashion, and when I say fashion designers aren't great, like the newer fashion designers, I'm talking about the ones that have been granted an opportunity. So when I was at CSM, there were designers that made collections that I was like, wow, this is sensational. But unfortunately, I don't think those designers would get a chance, because fashion is very cliquey and it's about who you know, and it's about who you've met and who's in your social circle and who can vouch for you. And these people that I'm talking about from CSM don't really have that network. But if we're talking about their work as designers, they are amazing. But then the people that get, a chance at these major luxury houses, they don't really have anything to say. And it's very unfortunate. Kind of what Dolce Jeans is saying, and like you said, the new blood that actually made it into the system aren't very good. These big brands need to dig deep. I mean, if they want to ask me who I should recommend, these brands, I can recommend really good designers that are young to these brands. Whether they would hire them is another story entirely. I'm tired that every fashion conversation somehow revolves around the financial and not the creative. I know, right? And it's just, I don't know why, like, like a lot of designers just seem so inspired. It's like not every single, I'm exaggerating for a certain effect, but a lot of designers, they seem to get their inspiration points from the same places. And it almost makes, as a fashion critic, right? When I read collections that is another take on punk, I just think to myself, like, do you not want to learn about anything else that goes on in the world? Do you not want to, like, explore anything? What you're doing is the bare damn minimum, because everyone talks about punk in fashion. There are thousands of subcultures all around the world. Why is it that a lot of designers end up going back to grunge and punk when there are so many subcultures to explore that haven't been explored enough in fashion? I don't get it. I don't understand it. I just I just don't get it. Like, these people go to design school, they're taught how to, think about fashion and learn and filter their ideas and think uniquely, but yet they still end up in the same place. I just don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't get it. Fashion before was hectic, but now it has insane pace. Micro trends, pre-fall, spring, actual seasons, resort, capsule collections. It became so overwhelming, not only for the designers, but for the consumers. That's very true. The fashion system now is a mess. Way too many collections. Good designers have PR girly friends and rich daddies whose mother works at Kering. Right. Finn would know. Finn would know. Also, yes, I've talked about this, Dolce Jeans, about luxury brands converging in kind of the way they look. It's kind of this, La Mer looks like Phoebe Philo, which looks like Jill Sander, which looks like Gucci right now. Um, they all kind of just look the same, which looks like Xenia. No originality or individual sense of individual style or design at all. Clint 419 for Burberry. I feel like that's why everyone lost their shit for this Margiela collection, because it was so artistic but totally unviable to spend a year designing a single collection, not in today's climate. Yeah, punk and luxury fashion is a bit oxymoronic, the same as grunge, which is why I had a bone to pick with Demna always referencing grunge while selling red plaid shirts for like $5,000. Insane. Literally a walking contradiction. And then when they say punk or goth, they just mean black velvet or plaid. Exactly. Exactly. It's so true though. You shouldn't be taught how to be fashion. Real designers teach the world what fashion can be and how far it can go in an artistic way. What I mean by these designers are taught how to think about fashion is in the sense that fashion inspiration can come from anywhere. In the sense that you can look at your surrounding environment and see the fashion there and be inspired by what you're seeing. So that meaning that you can be inspired by some place that you went to or something that happens in your family. It could be personal, it could be something that you dreamed about, it could be anything. But the last thing you want to do is keep referencing tired reference points in fashion. Like, let me tell you the tired reference points in fashion. Grunge is tired, punk is tired. Um, when you talk about art history, like pre-Raphaelites, tired, so tired. So many fashion campaigns, they have no ideas, so they're like, let's just make it look like pre-Raphaelites. It's so annoying. It's like there's so much art history in this world that there's so much more to reference than what you always reference, what everyone seems to decide to reference. So that's what I mean in terms of like being taught to view fashion. They're taught to broaden their horizons in the way that they think about clothes. At least I would guess if you study fashion design in school. Luke says Vivian Westwood was not punk to whoever needed to hear it. I mean, that's a conversation for another day. I've kind of touched on the Vivian Westwood and punk thing, and how like punk purists would probably not like Vivian Westwood's work because it's commercializing something that isn't supposed to be commercialized, because commercializing punk is not a punk thing to do in the first place. But yeah, that's a conversation for another day. Everyone romanticizes punk, even though it's been dead for decades as a subculture and ideology. Do you think it's the Eddie Salmon effect in terms of branding, salability? He never seems to stay at a house for more than 10 years. He always injects his look and style to wherever he ends up. I don't mind that though. I think if you have a look or a signature style and every brand that you go to, you kind of put that style there, I don't think that's an issue. I think that's a lot better. Having your own signature style that's, very recognizable is a lot better than brands looking like other brands, like looking exactly the same as other brands. It's crazy how this collection was so requested from clients and press. They had to close the doors to orders because they cannot fulfill the order sizes. Galliano has said he's upset about it. Damn. I didn't even know it was that requested. That's actually insane. Will we ever see another Galliano and McQueen again, or someone that changes the fashion landscape radically enough to look at the clothing and think that is something that no one else is doing? I mean, to be honest, there are designers that I feel that way about, but they're not mainstream. And I don't know if they'll ever be mainstream like a Galliano or a McQueen, because they're not designing at major Paris-based luxury labels, I guess, or like, Italy-based luxury labels. So like someone like Kane and Amia, his pattern making is insane. Like sometimes, like I see his stuff at Dover Street Market and I just read about his work and I'm like, what the hell? Or like I'll see it in a museum, like kind of like in a collection where they've got some Kane and Amia stuff. I'm like, what the actual hell? He is insane. But he's just not mainstream though, unfortunately. So I think there are people that have the skills, and there's people that I can mention that are super skilled, but it's just, are they going to capture the fashion zeitgeist like a McQueen or a Galliano? I don't really know. um I don't know. Finn says my most bought designer other than Rick. I love K is sensational. um and I also think it's because we have this assumption that the best designers, this is also a massive issue with fashion. I have a bone to pick with this in fashion. People always assume that the best designers must come from some Western place, which is it does a big disservice to fashion, because there are people from all around the world designing clothes. And maybe if you put someone who's a designer from like Colombia or Mexico or China or just anywhere, Thailand, at the top of these luxury labels, their reference points will be extremely different from what we're used to and what we're used to seeing, and it would kind of shake the fashion system a bit. But because we always resort to just the same old, like tired, European art history that everyone has referenced over and over again, tired techniques, tired silhouettes that have kind of been overdone. That's a big issue in fashion. I think if we start looking outside of that box, I think it would do a lot of good for fashion, looking at, designers from different regions that come from a different mindset. Yeah, I love Ziggy Chen, for example. I'm also a big fan of Uma Wang. I was reading the other day about Uma Wang's dyeing techniques, because Uma Wang, one of her garments is dyed by this specific Chinese tea, which gives it this interesting brown tint to it, which is so cool. But yeah, there's so many good designers, but I think it's this assumption that like everyone good has to come from FIT or CSM, or like, I think it does fashion a big disservice also. Um, we need more people like Tebe Magugu in the industry, where Tebe didn't go to one of those schools, but he literally won the LVMH prize, and the people at LVMH preferred his work over CSM and FIT and Parsons trained designers and stuff. So yeah, I just think we need kind of a changing of the guard and a changing of the way we view fashion and what designers are good and where they should be coming from and what schools they're supposed to go to be honest. Like there's so much creativity. I think people are just looking at the wrong places, or people are obsessed with fashion from only a specific place. That's what I personally think. I'm the next big thing, but I'm studying architecture. I mean, there are a lot of transferable skills from architecture to fashion, I will say. Intertextuality, making fashion a vacuum, only referencing what people are familiar with in order to strike chords of sensibility and in turn sell them the clothes. That's a good point, actually. Kind of like a very deliberate process of referencing things that people are familiar with, because if they're familiar with it, they can understand it easier and then they can buy into it easier. I'm a Salman fan and his aesthetic. However, I feel as though his commercial influence in turning a house to sell well has created the current revolving door of designers. I don't think it was Eddie Salman that did. I think it was That's just what Bernard Arnault came to expect from all his brands and all of that. I don't think that's a Eddie Simon thing. I think that's a Bernard Arnault thing. What's Tebe doing? So Tebe Magugu recently launched, I think his own, like his first store in Johannesburg called Magugu House, I think, and it's like really cool. So he's had a lot of articles coming out about that, and like who went to the store recently? I think Lupita visited the store and bought some things. So there was like a whole story about that. Um, so no, Tebe is alive and kicking. He's doing well. He's doing well. The change makers usually come from different practices because they see the medium differently. Exactly, Tarek, which is why I said that we need to change the way that we view where good fashion can come from, or where fashion that's good should come from, or what schools should be relevant when we're talking about good fashion. Yeah. And I say this as someone that went to CSM. I think there's a unhealthy obsession with specific fashion schools when there are literally there's probably someone in, I don't know, Vietnam who has been sewing clothes since they were a kid, and their construction skills are insane and they have crazy ideas, but because they didn't go to a fashion school that has all this like heritage, they're never really going to make it to any brand or work for any like big brand or anything like that, or start their own label, also because of like a lack of resources and stuff. The next McQueen is getting the bag with an ironic IG brand. The system hurts more than it helps. Luxury shouldn't be an industry or a title to strive for. It should be an idea that any scale of a brand can achieve through concept and execution. Yeah. That's why obviously we've had this conversation in terms of what does luxury actually mean these days? To me, luxury starts with quality and construction. To me, some people would tell you luxury is, how clothes make you feel and blah blah blah. Some people even chalk luxury to the price point that it comes with. I say I don't agree with any of that. I just think anything luxurious has to start by actually being made well. That's the first place it starts. So to me personally, in my head, if something isn't even made well, I can't consider it luxury. You could be charging $5 billion. I still don't see it as luxury in my head because it's not well made. So yeah, I think it just depends. Kemi says one of the reasons I chose to go to Bunker Fashion College instead of CSM. I also think it depends what you're looking for in a fashion school, right? Because at a school like CSM, they are more about nurturing your ideas more so than learning how to construct a garment. Whereas at Bunker, there's actually a lot of focus. You would know this, Kemi, if you went to Bunker. There's a lot of focus on actual like crafting skills, like Bunker, like pattern making, sewing, um, just using the machine. Um, I think Bunker prepares you more for working under a brand, where CSM prepares you more for starting your own brand. But I think the big issue with CSM, which I had this issue when, like, sometimes at CSM, designers would ask me to go look at their work because obviously me being a fashion critic and also me being someone that has actually worked in fashion in the capacity of like making clothes. So people want to hear my opinion, I guess, on like their collection. So I would go there. And some of these designers at CSM, the concepts behind their work, sensational. But then you look at the finished product and it's like the sewing is terrible, the finishing is terrible. Um, and I'm always telling them, like, if you want to start your own brand, if your plan is to start your own brand, when buyers look at your clothing, this exactly what I'm doing now, they would do the same thing. They're going to look at the way your clothing is finished. Yes, they might be sold by, the story and the narrative and whatever, but at the end of the day, if it's not well made, it's not well made. And buyers will have a big issue buying clothing that's not well made. So, unless buyers are more strict on unknown brands because it's more of a risk. If something is not well made, but it's a big brand that is known to sell anyway, they'd care less. But for someone like you, a design student, they would obviously actually care. The UK has an obsession with LCF and CSM, the end. I think the UK is not just LCF and CSM. I think the UK, when people talk about fashion design and fashion designers, they talk about Westminster, definitely, University of Westminster, Central St. Martin's, London College of Fashion, mainly. Those are like the main three. I'd say Westminster is definitely there too. Realistically, all the commercial expansion of fashion in the East, along with the crazy outsourcing out there, could mean that Asian designers' time at the top of fashion could be very soon. I would just enjoy that, just because just a different perspective on fashion would be refreshing, just in general. There's so much cool fashion coming from so many different regions, whether we're talking about Asia or Africa. It's just like so interesting. The fashion school major brand pipeline is kind of tricky because there are benefits both ways. But I think we've reached the point where the pipeline is producing questionable results. That's a good point too. That's definitely a good point. Okay, people are talking about what they think luxury represents or what it is. I feel like luxury is more like an imaginative, abstract thing that isn't really objective. Interesting. Oh, okay, Kemi, you're going to Bunker. Good luck at Bunker, by the way. Good luck. It'll be so cool though, like living in Japan and stuff. That's so cool. I feel like it's luxury if it's well made and limited. Few have real luxury. The rest is only a facade to make everyone feel special, because if everyone has it, it's no longer luxury, it's commonplace. Interesting. So, in the case of what you're saying, also you're saying that luxury has a sense of it being limited to. It's not something that should be easily accessible. Which is where I guess luxury fashion, in the sense of like big luxury brands like Dior, Balenciaga, that was kind of what it was before. It was only really like high society people and royals that could afford it. There's so much undiscovered talent out there right now. The obsession with the same 20 to 30, if that many at all, big name designers being forced by the powers that be has become tired. Studied at CSM must hit different on the LinkedIn bio. Oh god, that's funny. I'm saying Yancy says I want high quality clothes. Back in the day, people would save up for that jacket that they really wanted, and they'll be able to wear it for 15 years. I want that fantasy. I totally agree. CSM has a massive issue with supporting Western designers. Most of the tutors are white. Alonso, this is very, very true. Very, very true. Very extremely true. Extremely true. I think designers have it a lot harder, because if I think of me and Alonso, I know you went to CSM, so I know that you have a certain experience, I guess. But from my perspective, studying journalism, I guess the experience of being a journalist is a bit different to a designer, in the sense that my tutors and my lecturers, being journalists themselves, are quite open-minded, I would guess, more so than a design tutor, because to be a journalist is to learn about different designers from different places, and my lecturers have written articles in big publications about designers from all over the world. They've had to learn about people's work from all over the world, which is why when I wanted to do my a project, we had this like fanzine project that we did in first year, where everyone had to pick a designer to kind of, or a brand to do their project on, and a lot of people picked, the Pradas and the Rick Owens and stuff, and I was like, that's a bit boring, because I feel like most people have already done that every year, so why don't I choose like a different brand that probably no one has done before? So I chose Tebe Mugugu, And my lecturer at the time knew Tebe Magugu personally, had interviewed Tebe, all that sort of stuff, because journalists are quite, you have to be open-minded like that to work in the industry. Whereas I think for designers or a design tutor is just a designer that has their own views on fashion design, and they might, project that onto design students. So it's a completely different experience, I can imagine. And so if you have not just them being white, but if they have a very Western viewpoint and a very narrow viewpoint on what good fashion is or what good taste is, which a lot of fashion tutors I've seen kind of try to be arbiters of good taste, like they think that is their taste or nothing. That could be kind of hard as a design student to come up under that when you don't really, your aesthetic doesn't fall under what their idea of good taste is. Um, so yeah, it's a big issue because it ends up, the tutors end up filtering their students into thinking like them in a way. Okay, everyone's talking about luxury still. Everyone's talking about what they think luxury is. This is a very interesting conversation you guys are having in the chat. Alonso says, totally agree. The critical voice from CSM comes from FCP students, but definitely not from design departments. Yeah, I would have guessed that. And also just from what I heard from like my friends that were studying design at the time, I think, yeah, it's a massive issue. Which is why um a lot of times I'm on panels um for like the British Fashion Council, and I'm always on the panels of like who gets selected, I guess, for like scholarships or who wins certain awards. I've done a lot of different panels, and it seems always that I seem to be the only person fighting for um like a difference in thought to what everyone is used to. And it's really, really weird. Like I did this panel recently where I was literally the only non-white person. I was almost the only non-Italian person, apart from a few people. And so the designers that a lot of people gravitated towards, I didn't understand it because their aesthetic was something that I'd seen so many times. It was so tired. And there were other designers that were like, there was a Japanese designer that I thought was sensational, and they had such a different perspective on fashion. And I fought so hard to make sure that that person that they wanted to win the award didn't win, and I had my way. But it's amazing that it was kind of like a 10 versus 1 when I was in that panel. It was kind of like me versus everyone else. But then again, I am very I would say I'm very, what's the right word to use? Like I don't care. Like I don't care. I'm not like the average fashion person that would be like in a room full of people that are way more important than you in the fashion industry and be like, "Oh yeah, you guys are right." Like I don't care. I'm going to fight for what I believe in even if I have to argue against 50 people. I don't care. Um but that tends to be the case. So even when I'm in these panels, I can clearly see the lack of the lack of like how narrow the thinking is, even down to like who is chosen, who gets these awards. And it's so that's why I say this issue in fashion and the lack of creativity, it's a system issue, because it comes down to who gets the opportunities, because the people that get those opportunities and those scholarships and win those awards are probably the people that will use that as a springboard to progress into being creative directors at these brands, or to progress into having big brands that will, be LVMH prize finalists and, win the Walmart prize and win all these other awards, right? So it's a very, very deep system issue, and I feel very strongly about it, which is why I'm always fighting people about it in like boardrooms and stuff. But hopefully there's more people soon with different ways of thinking, and they just think differently or think from a different perspective. Carl says to me, taste isn't really a certain aesthetic, it's more like rules, like symmetry and visual balance. Hmm, interesting. That brown girl from CSM who got the scholarship, her graduate collection was tough. Who are you talking about? Do you know who you're talking about? Like what designer it is? I'm curious to know. It was only recently that the black models were complaining that they had to do their own hair and makeup. Yeah, because this is another thing I've talked about in boardrooms, and it's really annoying. Um, so a lot of schools for hairdressing and schools like makeup schools, like the famous ones, they don't teach people how to do makeup for varying like to do hair for varying hair textures or to do makeup for different skin shades and skin tones. So everything is very white centric, which means that you have literally critically acclaimed makeup artists that don't even know how to do makeup on like people from Latin American countries or people from African countries, or just like on black skin or like brown skin or like Indians, or like they just don't have a clue, and they're like winning all the awards and stuff, which is insane to me. Like you can basically do half of your job effectively, because if you can only do makeup on white hair if you can only do white hair, like European straight hair, or you can only do makeup on white skin, I don't see how you're a professional makeup artist. Part of being professional is you're supposed to be able to do everything. Otherwise, I don't get it. Like, how can you call yourself professional? It's just weird. Um I don't know, that's just strange. That's like being a professional basketball player, but like you don't know how to dribble the ball at all. You can just shoot. So like you don't even know how to dribble. You just stand in one place and like you never dribble ever. That would mean you're not a professional and you'd never make it to any good level of basketball, which is strange because in other walks of life and in other jobs, like being a makeup artist, you can actually get by being limited in your job and being mediocre at your job. It's mad. It's crazy. It's insane, but that's the fashion industry that we're in. The most important thing is having a point of view, but that's squashed by corporations who want to appeal to the masses to sell more clothes slash increase profit. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. This is true also. Sometimes I look at the lighting on editorials for black skin and it looks so dead and dull. Yeah, because a lot of people don't know how to photograph different colors of skin, which once again, people call themselves photographers and they don't like professional photographers, and they're bad at their job. Like they don't even know how to light different types of skin. It's insane. It's actually wild. Living in the UK, I had to bring a mixed woman makeup from Spain because she couldn't find good base for her 10 years ago. In the fucking UK, I couldn't find good lipsticks for my olive skin. Yeah, it's insane. Although I would say that because of like what Rihanna did with Fenty and the success of Fenty and stuff, I think that now, especially, there are more brands that are catering to different shades of skin and different undertones and stuff. It's still limited, but it's a lot better, definitely, than you know, a lot of years ago. All makeup artists and hairdressers should know how to work with all shades and hair textures. Basic math to me. Exactly. It's basic math to me too. I just it's why a lot of black models have messed up hair. Like that's why a lot of black models have like hair loss and stuff, because their hair, like all these crappy ass hairdressers put damaging products in their hair and don't even know that like the hair products that you put in European hair, you shouldn't put in black hair, and vice versa. Like they don't even know that. Like I'm not even a hairdresser and I know that. Like it's just crazy that that's people's like full-time job. Like how can that be your full-time job and you can't even do that? That's insane. That's actually insane. Like it spins my head. Um and I get so passionate about it because I literally have to shout about these things in boardrooms and I'm like, "Oh my god, that's so true." It's like it's 2024. Why are you telling me that's so true? Like it's do something about it. You guys actually have the power, not me. Don't be telling me, "Oh, Ayo, that's so true. That's such a it's such a great point to bring up. It's so timely that you brought that up." Like if the real me came out in that boardroom, I'd just be like, shut the fuck up and actually do something about it rather than just chatting shit. About, oh yeah, that's like such a great point to bring up. Like, yes, like it's so true, isn't it? I like, it's such a great point. It's so good, like that you brought that up. Like, oh yeah. I remember seeing Naomi Campbell in the 90s. Now I'm thinking who made her makeup, it was terrible. I've always valued being able to put the past into context, seeing as I've been following fashion since I was 12. Having a fresh perspective may come from serious left field, different past plus context. Interesting. Uh, photographers have been more mainly problematic in terms of limitations of model diversity. Um, that's part of it. It's also down to the way they shoot certain people or even the way they portray certain people, which I can open that can of worms if you want, but that's a conversation for another day. If I can date two Nigerians and know more about black hair than people working with hair every day, it's actually mad. Certified urban. Oh my god, that's way too funny. Oh yeah, this is another thing. Damaging people's hair by making sure that it's straight. Yeah, that's another bone to pick that I have with a lot of people. Um Ib Kamara has a huge impact on the fashion industry, by the way. Like crazy, crazy editorials. Yeah, Ib Kamara is amazing. Ib Kamara is amazing. Um, I just wish there were more creatives like Ib. Like the way Ib thinks, the reference points, the research into the shoots. Like everything he does is so well considered, which makes you stand out, especially now in a fashion industry where Jurgen Teller wakes up from his bed and snaps photos with his iPhone, and everyone's like, "Oh, but it's his photography style." Um, it makes you stand out. I've read about black hair salons in Brooklyn and the Bronx actually having extensive courses for white makeup artists on how to work with black hair, and they have a lot of takers. I don't know where they are because they're not in fashion. When I'm backstage at fashion shows, it seems like these makeup artists don't know what they're doing with hair that isn't white and straight. Like, I'm not even, these makeup artists are so bad and these hairdressers are so bad. Let's even remove like black hair or like Asian hair from the conversation. These makeup artists struggle with white hair that's curly. Like they only know how to work with straight European hair. If you're a white woman and you have like really really curly hair, they don't know what they're doing. Putting products in your hair that damages it, like literally. And I'll be seeing it in 4K. Like, what are you doing? But obviously, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not trying to cause a fight backstage. Who do you think you are? I'm a critically acclaimed hairdresser. Like, how dare you tell me how to do my job? So I just let them do their job wrong, and hope that one day they learn. Exactly. Curly Latin hair in Spain, it was super racist till the 2000s. Do younger people read Days, ID, Pop, Love? I don't really know. I don't really know if younger people even read magazines these days. It seems like people get their information from TikTok. Like really young people, I think they get their information from TikTok. Look at Prada for 2018. They fucked all of the black girls' hair up. I mean, no surprises there. Wait. All my friends used to iron their hair. That was the nice thing in Spain because in Spain our hair is more on the cut. Iron their hair is crazy. That is insane. Like the damage, iron their hair. Damn, that's actually insane. That's actually insane. That's so bad for your hair. Um, that was a Knox debut moment, and her hair looked a fool. It's just annoying. It's just annoying. I think why it really annoys me is because, like I said, when I have these conversations with people that actually have power, it's always the same. It's always that's such a good point that you brought up, Io. Like it's so that's a great point, but they never do anything about it. They never do anything about it. And then I see them again, and then we have the same conversation. Like, yes, it's very true. It's very true. It's very true, and they still don't do anything about it. Like if I had power, I would have changed that shit immediately. Like if I would have I would like make sure that I had ties to the biggest hairdresser agencies and like um makeup artists, and basically I'd make sure that they don't get signed unless they can work with different skin and different hair, which would force people to actually learn about it. But like the people I'm talking to, they have power to do this, by the way. Like these are people who are high up at major luxury brands. These are people that actually decide who are the makeup artists for the shows. These are people who decide who the hairdressers are that work on these shows. Like these are people that actually decide the stuff. And these are the people that don't do anything about it. They're literally like, oh yeah, it's like so good for bringing it up. We'll revisit this conversation again in 2 years when you tell me again about this same issue. Um, Finn says sorry for bringing it up. It's fine. It's fine. Have you noticed that a lot of black models now show up for fashion weeks in braids? I didn't actually notice that. Maybe that. Well, I can imagine they're doing that because they don't want these makeup artists to touch their hair. This explains so much why dark skin models generally look like they blend in with the photos. But I never thought that someone messed up without someone pointing that out. Okay, yeah. Who are some young designers you have good things to speak on? Loads. Loads. I mean, there's the more famous ones. Well, I guess they're not young, but like I was talking about like Kane and Mia, Uma Wang, like all that sort of stuff. Young designers, you have people like Charlie Constantino, you have Alexander Bagnall, who makes more like sportswear stuff, but it's really cool. Even just in London alone, there's like loads of sensational designers. Like I could start riffing off. Um, so yeah, there's loads. There's loads. Someone's asking about Kid Super. A lot of brands have just started using wigs on black and brown models, and in my opinion, it's just really problematic because it avoids the issue not to address it. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. What are your thoughts on Ib at Off White? I don't really have an opinion. I don't really. Ib as a creative director, as a cultural curator, I think he's amazing. At Off White, whether that's him or whether it's because it's a very commercial brand and filtering his ideas to make it more commercial, I don't know, but I'm not a big fan of the stuff he's doing at Off White, is what I'll say. In the art world, we don't use young anymore as people enter the game at any age. We say emerging. Yeah, that's kind of where how I see it. It's more like who are the emerging designers rather than just like young. Because some designers are like they might have been designing for a few years, but they're like in their 30s, 40s, or whatever. Um, so yeah. The name Kid See by itself lets me know that it's new age mid. That's crazy. That's insane. Even Nicole Kidman, she has very curly hair. She said she regrets to straighten it because it changed her hair. Yeah, I mean, whatever hair type you have, if it's not naturally straight, if any way that you straighten it with heat is going to damage your hair. Um, and it makes it even worse if you put products in your hair that's made to make it straighter. That's even worse. Which, happens to a lot of models in fashion. And I can imagine Nicole Kidman has probably dealt with a lot of hair damage, just, being as famous as she is, and all the probably all the shoots Nicole Kidman has probably done in her life, like hundreds. I can imagine they've just done all sorts of things to her hair. And like I said, even for white women, if you don't have that quintessential like straight hair, the hairdressers don't even know what they're doing even then. So like even when we start talking about different regions and like, people from Latin American countries and their hair, or like black women, like these hairdressers are absolutely lost, like completely clueless. What is saying off white? My favorite off-white thing ever was the Arc'teryx jacket with the full elaborate dress. That was interesting. It was actually quite funny also that that was not an official collaboration. Like Virgil Abloh just kind of just did that. Do you think we'll start to see more designers take the collaboration route of lesser known brands? Kiko with Asics back with the first gel burrs. That was really cool, by the way. And now doing clothes with Fox Sports, PAF with On Cloud. I hope so. I think it's interesting because also when these designers are collaborating with smaller known companies, they have more creative freedom, which is why like the Kiko Kostadinov, whether you're talking about the gel burrs, the gel delvers, all the different stuff he's done at Asics. It's interesting because he has more creative freedom than like at the bigger brands. I did a shoot last year and had to fight for a black makeup artist when I knew 3 out of 5 models weren't white. I mean, that's the state of the fashion industry. These days, black models and maintain to have their own hairstylist for the most part. Yeah, there's a lot of black models, which is actually insane, that come with their own hairstylist. That's actually wild that they have to like spend their own money or take money out of the budget that's left for them just so that their hair isn't destroyed. And so something that because I've spoken to like a few of my friends who are like black models, they've said that like it's kind of like a spiraling effect because it's like you have to bring your own makeup artist, but then if you bring your own makeup artist, you're seen as difficult, and then if you're labeled as difficult, then it starts to affect the jobs that you get, and it affects your ability to get certain jobs because they don't want people that are difficult and are going to make a fuss and not just use the makeup artists that are provided. So it kind of works against you, which is insane. Like just wanting your hair to be done properly is like working against you in the industry. It's like crazy. Um, Cynthia says in the US, all beauticians know or hair texture. My niece is a certified beautician for 15 years. It's the law. They won't have a license if they don't. How old is your niece? You don't have to say. I'm just wondering because like most of the makeup artists I see, especially at the bigger brands, they're not young. So it could be maybe the way that it's taught. But even you saying that I've been advocating for in London beauty schools to teach all hair textures and stuff, and they still don't till today. Um, so maybe in the US it's different, but in the UK it's definitely still a problem. But I don't live in the US, so I wouldn't know. I can't say for sure. I think the fact that Pat McGrath is so well lauded in fashion as a makeup artist, and yet people don't know how to do makeup for people who look like her is insane. I know, right? It's actually crazy. It's actually crazy. It's quite insane. Mac have been selling diversity color palettes from the beginning. I wouldn't agree. I wouldn't agree. And the reason why I wouldn't agree is because once again, I don't use makeup, but being black, my sister is black, and my whole family is black. And a lot of my family members, I remember growing up, used to say that MAC didn't stock their shade. And it's actually only recently that MAC has actually expanded their range of color palettes because of the success of a lot of other because of the success of a lot of other brands that have seen success because they've been more diverse. So I wouldn't say that Mac's color palette has been very diverse from the start. I would say it definitely is more so now, but from the start, I wouldn't agree with that. That definitely wasn't my experience listening to women around me like growing up. That I don't think that's true. Iman had that issue in her early years, and that prompted her to create her own line. Exactly. Exactly. It's the same reason why Rihanna started her Fenty Beauty line too. Yes, and the worst part is that professionals who don't know shit are still working without any problems, while models are seen as difficult for wanting a proper makeup artist. I know, right? It's insane. It's insane. My friend who went to cosmetology school told me about how he had to teach himself how to actually do makeup on black skin since his makeup school slash agency did not teach him anything also about hair. Yeah, that's why I said maybe in the US is different, but at least in the UK, yeah, I know it's still a big issue. I had the chance to interview Pat, and she was explaining how she had to relearn how to do makeup once the fashion industry switched over to digital cameras. That's really interesting. That's Izzy, that's such a cool point. Also really cool that you interviewed Pat. I'm so jealous. But yeah, because the way that the tone of colors and the way things photograph is really different when you're talking about like, shooting on film versus shooting digitally. So that makes a lot of sense why she would have to like to achieve the same look, the makeup would have to look different. The makeup would have to be applied differently. So that's really interesting actually. But I think it's like any job. Like every job you're supposed to be learning constantly on the job. You should never I don't think there's any job where you should just assume that you know everything. It's kind of like me as a journalist, I'm always reading fashion books all the time. Um, an athlete is always training. It's kind of weird to just be a makeup artist and just think that you don't need to learn about different hair textures and stuff. That's actually quite crazy. Like when you actually sit down and think about it, that's actually insane. Like how many jobs do people just not learn? Like they just stop learning. That's crazy. Also, can we talk about how the allure of the 90s has a lot to do with the lower quality um of cameras? Oof. Opening Pandora's box. I think it's different parts of the US. We basically live in 50 different countries. I'm sure more diverse places have different standards for hair and makeup artists. Yeah, you know what? Sometimes I forget how massive the US is because California is literally bigger than the UK. So yeah, the US is like 50 different countries. It's actually insane. That place is huge. And that has a lot to do with the high definition cameras that we use and how it picks up every imperfection on the skin. Yeah. Wait, what did Kroll say? Um, okay, yeah. You should look into the work Google's doing called Real Tone to make sure that doesn't happen on Pixel phones. Oh, this is actually a really, really interesting conversation. Let me have a look. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. So skin representation. Portraits on picture represent the nuances of different skin tones for all people beautifully and authentically. So basically, does this mean, Izzy, that they're essentially calibrating, like, first of all, the cameras that they make on their phones and just like their websites to make sure that the way that other skin tones photograph is actually like considered? Because I feel like maybe software before would only consider the way white skin is photographed. That's actually really good. Because most times, I think it's just natural to me. Normally, anytime I take a picture of myself or someone takes a picture of me or whatever, I always just increase the shadows because it's always so shadowy on my skin. I don't know why. So this is actually cool if they're actually, taking into account different skin tones in the way that their cameras pick up the skin tones to take pictures. That's actually really cool. That's really, really cool. Leah says how the image is being processed in respect to light. Exactly. So that's what I was saying, because why I was saying that normally when I when I have a picture taken, I just immediately, it's just innate, increase the shadows, because you know that it's just gonna, the lighting's going to be strange, especially in the shadows. Let's see. People talking about Annie Leibovitz. I remember that. I Do you know what's funny about the Annie Leibovitz pictures? I think one of the shoots she did, was it Lupita that was in it? I think it was. But anyway, she made their skin look washed out. And I remember people saying, "Oh, but that's just her photography style." And I just had to hold my tongue. Oh, that's her style of photography. Oh, Izzy says they're working with image experts like Kira Kelly and Jean Ivory to help. That's so. Oh, you interviewed Pat for this. That's so cool. That's so cool. Thanks so much, Izzy, for the insight. That's really, really, really good insight. And it's quite sad that they're only just doing these things. It's crazy to think about, but it goes back to my thing that I was saying, where I'm literally in boardrooms and I'm telling people about these things, and they're like, "Yeah, that's such a good point," but they'd never do anything about it. So it's like, it takes someone like a Pat who's way more important than someone like me. I'm literally irrelevant compared to Pat in the industry in terms of like power, pull, money, fame, like everything basically. So if Pat pushes for these kind of things, then of course people take it more seriously than if I push for it. So it's sensational that, Pat's pushing for these things, and these things are actually being changed. So yeah, it's cool. It's good. When I'm filming, my subjects are lit to the hills, and I use the same for still images. Izzy, please post some links to inform me. Certain phones in Asian markets have configured their filters and cameras for skin tone and around beauty standards. That's interesting, but I also think that it makes a lot of sense, because obviously Asian skin is very different to European skin. It's kind of like olive undertones. So it makes sense why they would have to calibrate the cameras a bit differently. So yeah, it's interesting. Me and Annie, are you okay? Leap of it. You then have to hold your tongue a lot, don't you? I can relate. No one wants to hear anything but the sound of their own voice. Yeah. It's because, like, obviously I said Annie Leibovitz like doesn't know how to photograph black skin, and the person's immediate rebuttal was, Well, that's just her photography style, and I did have to hold my tongue because I don't think they realize that like how that comes across. Just like taking everything I said, basically scrunching it up and throwing it into the trash, and then being like, no, but that's just how she shoots. It's like, no, she just doesn't know how to shoot that skin tone. Um, oh yeah, Izzy. The Discord link will be in the description of this live stream. So it should be in the description of this live stream. If not, let me see if I can share a link in the chat right now. But yeah, the Discord has been buzzing recently, so definitely join in. We would love your insights. Love to have a some fun fashion chats. We're just talking about fashion all the time, so it's really fun. Some sympathies go out to Renzo. Why? Because Galliano is leaving. That's funny. Let me just get this link quickly for people that want to join the Discord. Um, let's see. Okay, so I have the link now, so I'm going to share it to the chat. And it's also just the color grading on a lot of these photos too. If Annie's pics were sent raw, I bet my ass I could color grade it into a way more flattering way. Yeah, that's true. It comes to like not knowing the lighting. Also, it comes to like not knowing how to color grade correctly for certain skin tones. Because some photographers, right? They're quite lazy in the sense that they just have presets. So if they shoot in, a setting that is quite warm, they have a warm preset without taking into account different people's skin tones, different people's undertones, and all that stuff. So they just slap on the same preset, which to me is so lazy. But it's just what a lot of photographers do. Oh, people are talking about Law Roach. Oh my god. What do I think about Law? Oh, few people want me to get into trouble. Jeez. Jeez Louise. Um, on that note of Law Roach, I shall be taking my leave, but thank you thank you everyone for tuning in. Um, the next stream will be about what's been going on at Burberry. That'll be a lot of fun. Unless there's any news that happens in between then. Also after that, I will be streaming about Peter Coping and him at Lanvin, and kind of what we can expect from him at Lanvin. So that'll be really cool. So yeah, thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next stream, hopefully.